It's the world this week. We're looking back at the events that have marked the past 7 days in partnership with the Daily Beast. Aaron Zaleski, Paris correspondent, just back from California.
Yes.
And happy to be back in Paris?
I am, actually.
All right. And there's plenty to talk about. We'll also be in the company of Judah Grunstein, editor-in-chief of World Politics Review. If I wanted to find World Politics Review, where would I look?
I think the best place to start would be worldpoliticsreview.com online.
Okay. There's also with us, columnist for the Sunday Telegraph, and Elisabeth Moutet.
Good evening.
Rested and ready after...
Well, ready considering the news, not quite sure, but we never are.
Okay. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag World This Week. Barack Obama knew this wasn't going to be an easy one, this Asia tour, when Chinese protocol inexplicably made him the only leader at the G20 summit not to get a proper stairwell or red carpet. Tarmac tantrums ensued, with one Chinese official screaming, "This is our country." The U.S. president, well, he smoothed over the snafu and signed the Paris climate change deal with its hosts. But he already had another storm brewing at that time. The new president of the Philippines objecting to criticism of his hardline war on drugs policy that's resulted in 2,400 extrajudicial killings in the Philippines since Rodrigo Duterte took office.
I am a president of a sovereign state, and we have long ceased to be a colony. I do not have any master except the Filipino people. Nobody but nobody. You must be respectful. Do not just throw away questions and statements. Putang ina, mumurahin kita dyan sa forum na yan.
All right, Obama would go on to cancel a long-planned meeting with the man known as Duterte Harry on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit, but not before, well, trying to explain that son of a whore remark.
I just heard about some of this, but I have seen some of those colorful statements in the past. And so clearly he's a colorful guy. And what I've instructed my team to do is to talk to their Philippine counterparts to find out, is this in fact a time where we can have some constructive, productive conversations?
Judah Grunstein, your reaction to that, because there was this, on the one hand, what ensued, we know, at the ASEAN summit was they canceled the meeting, they had a little handshake, but then Duterte went into a speech where he said, colonial masters shouldn't lecture on human rights, an allusion to the fact that the U.S. colonized the Philippines.
Well, I mean, again, it depends what you're looking at in the story and in the relationship, because obviously this is it's a newsworthy incident, and it's exciting to see like these kind of public spats when they're supposed to be very orchestrated affairs of summitry and things like that. At the same time, the Philippines absolutely depends on the United States for its security at this particular moment. I think in the opening of the summit, the Philippine government revealed that there were Chinese boats massing around one of the contested islands in the South China Sea. The Philippines obviously cannot stand up to China, has just really cozied up to the United States after about a decade of keeping the U.S. at arm's length in terms of basing soldiers or military forces in the Philippines. They're still not going to be based, but they will be able to use Philippine bases. So again, I think that Obama handled it very deftly, very diplomatically. He doesn't really have to worry about Duterte. He's not.
And how did Duterte handle it? Because he expressed regret, saying this wasn't. He didn't apologize, but he expressed regret over it.
Again, Duterte is sort of the latest version of this model that we've seen now on the global in terms of world leaders. In the line of Putin, in the line of Erdogan in Turkey, in the line of Orban in Hungary, some candidates, including Donald Trump in the United States. Again, some are much more savvy than others. Putin, for instance, is a lot more savvy. They're all of the same vein. They're this populist strain with a shoot from the hip style. Duterte in particular, he was known as being a pretty effective mayor of a big city, but also someone who is colorful, as Obama said, and who can kind of is a wild card. And the big question when he was elected was, did he have the temperament to be the president of the Philippines at a moment when there's a lot of really long-term strategic stuff going on, and B, his posture toward the war on drugs, because he was known in the city that he was the mayor of for being a shoot first, ask questions later when it came to drug dealers and policing, especially drug crimes. So these two things are on display in this incident. They underline the concerns that people had, but in the long term, when Obama said he'd instructed his people to speak to their Philippine counterparts, those are the relationships that matter over time, and those are the relationships that will smooth over things like this.
And Isabeth Mute, this shoot first, ask questions later policy, popular among a lot of Filipinos. Does it undermine the state, though?
I think it undermines Obama because it's very obvious that it's open season on the lame duck president of the United States. And considering that when he arrived, there was this whole rebalancing of America's relationship with Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, I think, yes, he handled graciously the insult, but the fact that it seems to have no consequences whatsoever to insult him in a part of the world where basically losing face matters. I mean, the Chinese non-welcome was also something amazing when you think about it.
How do you explain that?
I think the Chinese just don't like Obama, and they decided to make a point, and they also could make the point because it doesn't matter really if they're making the point. He's a lame duck. So I don't think it's as good as one thinks. I think that when Obama arrived, he was supposed to make the world respect America again after the horrible George W. Bush, but people did not, world leaders did not try to do this to George W. Bush because they feared that there might be consequences, and very obviously there are no consequences now, and this is probably going to be at one stage part of the campaign. It should be part of the American campaign. It is rather sad that it is going to be more useful to Trump than it's going to be useful to Hillary Clinton.
Aaron Zaleski, what do you make of Duterte? What do you make of this?
Well, I think he's been likened to the Filipino Donald Trump for a reason. I mean, this is someone who just sort of says whatever comes into his head, for better or worse. And I think that the U.S. did have a right to question the human rights record. He's been linked to death squads during his tenure as mayor of Davao. He's made comments along the lines of it's perfectly reasonable to assassinate corrupt journalists. The sort of vigilante style of justice that is something to be concerned about.
Is it Philippine specific, or should we be reading more into this?
For the moment, I think it's Philippine specific. But because the Philippines is an important U.S. ally, I think it remains to be seen how this is going to play. Again, Obama's going out, but how this is going to play with the incoming U.S. president.
Aaron Zaleski mentioning Duterte being branded the Filipino Trump. Well, the genuine article making waves this week at a security forum where in front of top brass he blasted the U.S. military generals and heaped praise on Russia's president.
Well, the generals under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton have not been successful.
Do you know more about ISIS than they do?
I think under the leadership of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, the generals have been reduced to rubble. They have been reduced to a point where it's embarrassing for our country. I think I would have a very, very good relationship with Putin. If he says great things about me, I'm going to say great things about him. I've already said he is really very much of a leader. I mean, you can say, oh, isn't that a terrible thing? The man has very strong control over a country.
As far as Mr. Trump, I think I've already offered my opinion. I don't think the guy's qualified to be president of the United States. And every time he speaks, that opinion is confirmed. The most important thing for the public and the press is to just listen to what he says and follow up and ask questions about what appear to be either contradictory or uninformed or outright wacky ideas.
Listen to what he says and follow up. Aaron Zaleski, are American voters going to do that?
Well, that remains to be seen. And again, as the president was mentioning, I think it's important for the press to really push hard on follow-up questions. And I don't know if any of you watched that debate a couple of nights ago. It was sort of a train wreck in every respect, in that I think neither candidate really had a cohesive, strong, detailed position on the issues. They sort of were making these statements, but they didn't have a lot of specifics. I mean, the ISIS issue, for one, okay, how are we going to defeat ISIS? They didn't really have a coherent strategy. There was no details.
All right, a train wreck, you say. I'm going to challenge that. The Economist's front page is about post-truth politics in the age of social media. In its lead editorial, Art of the Lie, there you see the front page. The lead editorial, the magazine writes the following: Mr. Trump is the leading exponent of post-truth politics, a reliance on assertions that feel true, but have no basis in fact. His brazenness is not punished, but taken as evidence of his willingness to stand up to elite power. I ask this because a train wreck perhaps in your eyes, but is it a train wreck in the eyes of most voters?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think that's going to be reflected in the polls. I mean, I feel like, yes, that the postmortem on the debate found that Trump basically, he, 43 instances of falsehoods or something. I'm a bit, far less than Clinton's, but neither candidate really offered any specifics.
And Isabelle Moutet, are we really in a new post-truth era?
Well, there's a style, certainly, that is in like that. But I remember years ago when François Mitterrand was president of France and he was facing the first iteration of the Le Pen family, the father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. And Jean-Marie Le Pen, was into post-truth himself, always has been. And he sent against Le Pen Bernard Tapie, the controversial businessman, who is what the French call une grande gueule, he's a loudmouth. And he was the only person who managed to stop Trump in the debate. And I think this beautiful, slightly etiolated way of saying, oh, listen to him, and very charming, that doesn't work. And the only way is to go at him and say, is it the role of a candidate to the office of President of the United States to heap praise on the president of another country? This is treason, and use those words, because those will be heard. That's the only way to go at it. And nobody's trying to go to Trump with the methods of the rhetoric that would say this man...
Are you playing debate coach here to Hillary Clinton?
Yes. Somebody has to. She's terrible.
Judah Grunstein.
Well, I forget the name, but there's a famous quote from a mathematician at one point where he's given a proposed proof, and he looks at it and he says, "This isn't even wrong," in the sense that it's so far off the mark that you can't even put it in the criteria of right or wrong. It's just irrelevant. When you listen to Trump through a rational lens, or when you look at what he says through a rational lens, it doesn't add up. Everyone knows, for instance, when he says, "I have a secret plan to defeat ISIS," everyone really knows that he does not have a secret plan to defeat ISIS. And I think that's what The Economist is getting at, having read the editorial. It's post-truth. It's clearly not true, but it doesn't matter. It's unrelated to the truth. At the same time,
it doesn't matter because it's good TV. You just move on and up.
No, it's not that. It doesn't matter, or it is that, but it's also, it doesn't matter because right now the political environment structurally favors someone like Trump, in the sense that people don't really believe what he's saying. They don't believe he has a secret plan. When he says, "I'm going to build a wall and make Mexico pay," they don't necessarily believe that. But it shows that the emotion, it expresses the emotion that they're feeling, which is, you know what, we're fed up with all of you and we just want all of you gone. And there's that. There's also the fact that Trump is a very classic American archetype. He's the huckster. He's the carnival barker. He's the snake oil salesman. There's a reason why that character, and it's not just strictly American. I mean, it's in Commedia dell'arte also, but it is very archetypically American. You see it in Mark Twain novels. You see it in westerns. You see it in Broadway musicals and theater. There's a reason why that has been so prevalent throughout the history of the United States. It works, and he knows that. That's how he's built his business. He was a featured guest for years on professional wrestling programs. That's his persona, and it works. People like it. People respond to it. So he took the gamble that he can translate that persona, which in a political context is absolutely absurd. He's taking this gamble that it can work in a political context. We'll see in November whether it works. Until the polls tightened recently, I really categorically excluded the possibility that he could win the election. I don't think that what he's doing can appeal to enough voters in enough states, and especially the swing states. The question is whether the emotion will trump or will take precedence over the rational approach to politics. And right now, it's not a good time for rational approaches to politics, because if you look really rationally, everyone in power has failed miserably for at least the last 5 or 10 years. So why would you trust them for another 4?
Yeah, Barack Obama's suggestion that we heard to go fact check. How's that playing, Aaron Zaleski?
Well, I think some people are, and again, like Judah was saying, some people are so caught up in the emotional aspects of it that they're not bothering to do that. And again, I mean, it's interesting because this similar to Duterte. He was also a candidate who said he was sort of placed himself outside of the political elite. He was just one of, I'm just like everybody else, and he made sure to have this very toned down inauguration ceremony. And in a sense, I mean, Trump is a billionaire, so he can't really play the I'm just, like everybody else card. But separating himself from the political elite, saying, all those people are corrupt, I'm going to tell you the truth, even though he's not, but I'm going to tell you the way it is, that appeals to a lot of people who are fed up with politics and don't trust politicians.
Just one final point quickly before we go to break. The kick the bums out mentality that we've been describing, is that something new?
To this extent, yes. To this extent, it's true, and he doesn't speak like one of the elite. He belongs to the elite socially. His father was a millionaire, but it doesn't matter. And I think he can win. He wasn't even supposed to win the primaries, and surprise, he managed to win over 13 other candidates, and I think he can win, and he can win because you don't fight that kind of character the way they seem to be fighting him. Again, Hillary Clinton, who is very probably a very capable person, is not a good candidate. She is abrasive. She is being attacked in the most a terrifying way on Twitter, and it gets traction because she doesn't answer well the questions, and she is the arch insider, and the climate is not good for that. What Trump does, he articulates anger, and he does that very well, and I think, unfortunately, it is perfectly possible that you will have normal Clinton Democratic voters who will prefer him.
All right, so the next stop, the first debates. We'll be back. We got much more to talk about here in the world this week.